Dr. Martin Hayes sat alone in the medical bay of Research Station 7, watching the stars through the reinforced viewport. He had been here for almost 2 years now, and the quiet had not bothered him once. The silence was what he wanted. After 30 years of fighting in 3 different wars across 3 different galaxies, silence felt like a gift. Martin was 64 years old. His hands, which had performed thousands of surgeries and saved countless lives, now trembled slightly when he was tired. His back hurt most mornings. His knees made sounds when he climbed the station's metal stairs. He had earned this retirement, and he was not going to waste it on anything except peace. The station was mostly empty. The main government had shut down most operations here 5 years ago. Now only a skeleton crew remained. There was Henderson, the station manager, who spent most of his time in the control room. There was the mechanic who kept the old engines running, and there was Old, who managed the supply systems. That was it. 4 humans on a station built to house 300. Martin liked it that way. His daily routine was simple and comforting. He would wake at 6 in the morning. He would make coffee in his quarters. He would walk to the medical bay and review old case files from his military days. Then he would spend the afternoon maintaining medical supplies that would probably never be used. He would make dinner, usually something basic. Then he would sit and watch the stars until he was tired enough to sleep. Today was different only because it was New Year's Eve. Martin had made the effort to get something better than his normal ration meal. He had synthesized a decent protein, and he was preparing it with extra nutrients from the station's emergency supplies. It was a small celebration just for himself. No one else on the station had mentioned the new year. They probably did not care. Martin was stirring his meal when the station's intercom crackled to life. "Dr. Hayes, this is Henderson," came the manager's tired voice. "The supply transport is not coming in this year. They sent a message saying the route has been changed. We will not see supplies for another 18 months at least." Martin stopped stirring. He had been expecting something like this. The government was pulling further back from this sector every year. Soon there would be no point in keeping the station open at all. "Understood," Martin said back to the intercom. "We have enough supplies to manage." "That is what I figured," Henderson said. "Just wanted to let you know. Happy New Year, Doc." "You too, Henderson." The connection ended with a soft click. Martin looked at his meal. It suddenly seemed less important than before. He would be spending another year on this station, alone with his memories and his routine. He did not know if he felt disappointed or relieved. He finished his meal slowly. It was still good even if the occasion felt less meaningful now. When he was done eating, he cleaned his dishes carefully. He had learned during his military days that maintaining routine was important. Keep the station clean. Keep yourself clean. Keep your mind occupied with small tasks. That was how you survived isolation. Martin was walking back to the medical bay when the alarms started screaming. He had not heard those sounds in 2 years. For a moment, his mind did not even recognize them. Then his military training kicked in and recognition flooded back. Those were proximity alarms. Something had entered the station's detection range. Martin moved quickly to the nearest communication panel. His hands were steady now, despite his age. Military instinct ran deep. "Henderson, what is happening?" Martin called out. There was a pause. Then Henderson's voice came back, and it sounded afraid. "We have an unidentified vessel in the system. It came out of nowhere. No transponder signals, nothing. It is running dark, and it is moving erratic. Engines are damaged. I think it is going to crash." "Where?" Martin asked. "Sector 4, about 3 kilometers from the station. It is coming down fast." The alarms continued to wail through the station. Martin thought for a moment. This was not his problem anymore. He was retired. Let Henderson handle it. But even as the thought formed, he was already moving toward the equipment lockers. He was already pulling on his emergency suit. The suit was old and heavy. He had not worn it in 2 years. It felt wrong against his body, like putting on a skin he had shed a long time ago. But the seals were good and the oxygen readings were full. Martin grabbed a medical kit from the shelf. Old habits died hard. "Henderson, I am heading to the crash site," Martin said into his suit communicator. "Hayes, that is crazy. We do not know what that ship is." "That is why we need to know what is on it," Martin said. He was already moving toward the airlock. "Someone down there might need medical attention." "It could be hostile." "Then they probably will not want anything from an old man with a medical kit," Martin said. Just keep the station locked down and ready to seal the outer sections if needed. Before Henderson could argue further, Martin cycled through the airlock and stepped out onto the surface of 438B. The planet's surface was cold and rocky. 2 moons hung in the dark sky, casting everything in pale blue light. Martin moved carefully down the slope toward the crash site. His suit's scanners showed him thermal signatures about 2 kilometers away, something large and hot, cooling quickly. He walked for 20 minutes, his lungs burned with effort. His legs ached. But Martin had learned long ago that pain was just information, and he knew how to ignore information when he needed to. He kept walking. The ship came into view as he crested a ridge. It was unlike anything Martin had ever seen, not human, not from any species he recognized from his military days. The hull was dark and smooth, and it was torn open like a flower blooming in the wrong direction. There was no fire, which was good. Whatever fuel it used, it had burned out or been vented during the crash. Martin approached carefully. His suit scanners were picking up radiation now, but at manageable levels. The ship's reactor had not gone critical. That was also good. He reached the torn hull and looked inside. Darkness. He activated his suit's external lights. That was when he saw movement. A shape shifted in the darkness, something large, something that was alive and awake and aware of his presence. Martin's heart rate increased, but he did not step back. He had faced dangerous situations before. The creature emerged from the shadows slowly. It was a dragon. Martin had read about the in military intelligence briefings. First contact had been almost 200 years ago, before he was even born. They had been encountered once, a peaceful species with an ancient civilization. Then they had simply withdrawn from galactic society. No one had seen them in centuries, but there was no mistaking what he was looking at. A massive dragon-like creature covered in scales that shimmered in the suit light. Its wings were torn and damaged. There was blood on its side. The creature looked at Martin with intelligent eyes. Those eyes held no anger. Instead, they held fear and pain and something else. Something that every living thing carried, regardless of species, the need to survive. But the dragon was not alone. Huddled against the creature's side, barely visible in the shadows, was something smaller, much smaller, the size of a human child, another dragon, a hatchling. Martin understood immediately. This was a mother and a child. The mother was badly injured, and the child was cold. Martin's suit computer displayed the radiation levels in bright red numbers. He had about 15 minutes before the exposure would become dangerous. He needed to work fast. The dragon mother made a sound, low and rumbling. Her eyes tracked Martin's movements. She was evaluating him, deciding whether he was a threat. Martin moved slowly and kept his hands visible. He had learned communication across species lines during his military service. Predators understood threat displays. They understood calm. He was being as calm as he could be. "I am here to help," Martin said. His voice sounded strange through the suit's external speakers. "Your child needs assistance. Let me help." The dragon could not understand his words, but she seemed to understand his intent. She made another sound, this one more panicked. Her massive head turned toward the hatchling, and she tried to move. A cry of pain escaped her. She had internal injuries. Her wing was at an angle that no wing should be at. Her blood was already staining the ship's floor. Martin approached the hatchling first. The small creature was barely responsive. Its scales were pale and dull. Its breathing was shallow. Hypothermia was setting in. The ship's life support systems had failed. The interior was nearly as cold as the outside air. Martin did rapid calculations in his head. The hatchling could not stay here. The mother could not be moved without causing more damage. Both would die in the next few hours if he did nothing. The mother would die from her injuries. The hatchling would freeze. He looked at his suit's thermal display. The heating elements in his suit were designed to keep a human warm in extreme cold. If he could somehow transfer that heat to the hatchling, he might keep it alive long enough to get it to the station. Martin made his decision. He opened his suit's emergency compartment and found the thermal wrap used for emergency situations. It was designed for humans, but it would have to work. He carefully approached the hatchling. The small dragon did not resist. It was too weak, too cold, too afraid. Martin removed the thermal wrap from his suit and secured it around the hatchling. Then he did something that violated every protocol he had been taught about handling unknown alien life forms. He opened his suit's front closure just enough to draw the hatchling close to his chest. The creature was small and light, no more than 30 kilograms. It felt fragile and cold and alive. Martin could feel its heartbeat against his chest. He carefully sealed his suit around the hatchling, leaving its head exposed but protecting its body with his own heat. His suit's computer immediately complained. Oxygen usage increased. Temperature regulation shifted to compensate. But the readings showed the hatchling's core temperature stabilizing. The small creature made a soft sound, almost like a whimper, and its tiny claws gripped Martin's suit material. Martin turned back to the mother. The massive dragon was watching him with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. Martin placed his hand on her scaled face as gently as he could. Her eyes were starting to lose focus. Shock was setting in. She was dying. "I will come back," Martin said. He had no idea if the dragon could understand, but he needed to say it anyway. "I will save your child. I swear to you I will come back and save you too, but I have to get her to safety first. Do you understand? I have to save her." The dragon mother closed her eyes. It might have been acceptance. It might have been resignation. Martin could not tell. He turned and moved out of the ship as quickly as his tired legs would carry him. The hatchling was secure against his chest, its breathing becoming more stable as his body heat warmed it. His suit's oxygen alarm was already starting to sound warnings about the extra weight and thermal drain. He had maybe 10 minutes of emergency oxygen at this consumption rate. Martin climbed the ridge, moving faster than he had come down. His knees screamed in protest. His lungs burned. His heart hammered in his chest, but he pushed forward. Behind him, the crashed ship remained dark and silent. Inside that ship, a mother was dying. Martin would deal with that, but first the child had to live. The station came into view. Henderson was waiting at the outer airlock, his own suit on, ready to help. Together, they cycled through the emergency entrance. Martin stumbled into the decontamination chamber, and Henderson helped seal the inner door. "What in the name of all stars do you have?" Henderson gasped. "Help me," Martin said. "No questions, just help me get to the medical bay." They moved fast through the station corridors. Martin could feel the hatchling's heartbeat against his chest, steady and growing stronger. His suit was reading critical oxygen levels. Another 30 seconds and the alarms would activate an automatic shutdown. They burst into the medical bay. Martin carefully removed his suit and extracted the hatchling. He laid the small creature on the examination table and immediately began checking vitals. Heart rate was elevated but stable. Breathing was shallow but regular. Body temperature was rising. The creature was still alive. Appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide. "Is that what I think it is?" Martin confirmed. He was already moving through the medical bay, gathering equipment. His hands moved with the practiced efficiency of 30 years. "Get me thermal blankets. Get me synthesized nutrients. Get me everything we have on alien physiology databases." "Hayes, what are you talking about?" Henderson demanded. "That creature is not human. We cannot keep an alien animal in the station." Martin looked at the hatchling. Its eyes were beginning to open. Small, intelligent eyes. Eyes that looked at him with fear and confusion and something else. A desperate need to survive. "We can," Martin said quietly. "And we will. Because that thing down there is still alive and she is the mother of this creature. And I promised her I would come back. I always keep my promises." Martin pulled up a stool and sat beside the examination table. The hatchling's tiny claws reached out and gripped his hand. He felt the small talons prick his skin, but he did not pull away. "Welcome to Research Station 7, he whispered to the creature. "I am going to keep you alive. I do not know how yet, but I will figure it out. I always do." The hatchling made a soft sound and closed its eyes. It was not dead. It was resting. It had decided to trust this old human with its life. Martin did not sleep that night. Instead, he sat beside the hatchling with every medical text he could find about dragon physiology spread across his station screens. Most of what he found was old and theoretical. They had been encountered only briefly, centuries ago, before they from galactic civilization. There were not many case studies to work from. What he did know was that the creature was severely malnourished. The scales were too dull. The muscles were too thin. The creature had clearly been suffering before the crash. Martin theorized that the ship might have been damaged for weeks, maybe months, with the mother struggling to keep the hatchling alive during a long journey. By morning, Martin had developed a plan. He began by synthesizing a nutrient solution. He combined proteins from the station's emergency supplies with basic carbohydrates and mineral compounds. He ran the mixture through analysis to ensure it was compatible with biochemistry, based on what little data he had. The hatchling was awake but weak. Its eyes tracked Martin's movements as he worked. There was intelligence behind those eyes, real intelligence. This was not an animal. This was a person, just in a different body. Martin prepared a feeding tube carefully. The hatchling did not resist when he inserted it, as if the small creature understood that Martin was trying to help. Martin administered the nutrient solution slowly, watching the creature's vital signs on the monitor. Over the next week, Martin fell into a pattern. He had abandoned all pretense of retirement. He barely left the medical bay. He monitored the hatchling constantly, adjusted the nutrient formulas, ran tests, made calculations. He talked to the creature constantly, explaining each procedure in calm, measured tones. "This is going to taste terrible," he would say, "but it will help your body heal. Your mother is still out there waiting for us. You need to be strong enough to survive until I can bring her back." The hatchling seemed to listen. It made soft sounds, which Martin interpreted as acknowledgement or agreement. They were developing a communication of their own. On the 8th day, something remarkable happened. The hatchling's scales began to show color. The dull gray started to shift to a deep blue. Silver markings appeared along the creature's spine and wings. Martin realized that the color changes were tied to the creature's health. As it got stronger, it became more vibrant. "You are beautiful," Martin said. He was sitting beside the creature, monitoring its heart rate. "You need a name. What should I call you?" The hatchling made a questioning sound. "Aurora," Martin decided. "You glow like the first light of morning. That will be your name." Aurora seemed to accept this. The creature made a content sound and closed her eyes for a rest. Martin spent that afternoon in the station's communication center, composing reports that he would never send. He documented everything Aurora needed, everything he was doing to keep her alive. It was good practice, keeping records. It was also a way of talking through his thoughts with someone, even if that someone was just a computer screen that would never read the words. The station manager Henderson came by the medical bay on the 10th day. "How is the creature?" he asked. He was being cautious now, keeping his distance from the examination table. "Improving," Martin said. "Her system was shut down from malnutrition, but she is responding to treatment. Another week and she will be able to move around on her own." "What are you going to do with her?" Henderson asked. "She cannot stay here forever, Doc. The station was not built to house exotic animals." "She is not an animal," Martin said simply. "And I will figure out what to do, but first I need to go back to the crash site and retrieve her mother." Henderson made a face. "That ship is a radiation hazard. We cannot let you go back out there. It is not safe." "The mother is still alive," Martin said. His voice was hard. "I promised that hatchling I would bring her back, and I do not break promises." "Hayes, be reasonable. You do not even know if the mother is still breathing. You do not know what that ship is carrying. It could be dangerous." "Then I will be careful," Martin said. He turned back to Aurora, who was resting quietly. "But I am going, with or without your permission." Martin did not wait for Henderson's response. Instead, he spent the rest of the day preparing. He gathered the station's highest radiation shielding suits. He gathered emergency medical equipment that might work on a massive creature. He gathered transport equipment that could hold something as large as the mother. That night, Martin sat with Aurora for hours. The hatchling was sleeping, her small body curled up on the medical bed. Martin reached out and gently stroked her scales. They were warm now, and they glowed faintly in the darkness of the medical bay. "I am going to get her," Martin whispered. "Your mother. I am going to bring her back here, and the three of us are going to figure out how to live together. I do not know if it will work. I do not know if I am strong enough or smart enough to do this. But I will try." Aurora opened one eye and looked at Martin. Her small claws reached out and touched his hand. The gesture was unmistakable. It was a plea. "Bring her back, please." "I will," Martin promised. He sat with the hatchling until she fell asleep again. Then Martin made himself stand up. His knees hurt. His back hurt. His hands were shaking from exhaustion, but he had work to do. The station's AI, which had been silent for days, suddenly spoke. "Dr. Hayes, your vital signs indicate fatigue and stress. I recommend rest before attempting the planned rescue operation." "I will rest after," Martin said. "Right now I need to get her mother. That is all that matters." The AI did not respond. Perhaps even machines understood when humans had made up their minds about something important. Martin spent the night reviewing the mother's injuries from memory. He tried to recall every detail, the angle of her wing, the location of the blood, the pale quality of her eyes as she looked at him. By morning, he had a plan for stabilization and transport. It was not a good plan. It was risky and dangerous and might not work at all, but it was all he had. Martin stood in the station's equipment bay, staring at the combat suit hanging before him. He had not worn this particular suit in 5 years. He had hoped he would never need to wear it again. The suit was heavy and uncomfortable, designed for military operations in dangerous environments. It had been built to withstand explosions and radiation and enemy fire. Now it was his best chance of surviving what he was about to do. He suited up slowly. The weight of the armor settled onto his shoulders like a familiar burden. His hands moved through the sealing procedures from muscle memory alone. Boots locked, chest plate secured, helmet sealed. He cycled through the pressure checks and the suit systems came alive around him. The suit's heads-up display painted the world in green electronic lines. His oxygen was full. His radiation shielding was maximum. His suit diagnostics showed 314 different systems, all functioning at optimal levels. The suit was ready for a war. Martin was not sure if he was. Appeared in the equipment bay doorway, watching silently. The mechanic did not try to stop him. Henderson had given up arguing the night before. Neither of them understood that Martin was not really making a choice here. When you had promised a dying mother to save her child, you did what needed to be done. Martin picked up the emergency medical kit and the transport sled. The sled was designed to carry heavy loads across difficult terrain. It would have to hold the mother without breaking. Martin had no way to know if it was strong enough. He would find out when he got there. "Take care of the hatchling," Martin said to. "If anything happens to me, keep her warm and keep feeding her the formula I prepared. There are instructions on the medical bay computer." "Nothing is going to happen," said, but his voice did not sound confident. "Something is going to happen," Martin said. "The question is just what. Either I bring the mother back or I do not. Either way, someone has to look after the young one." Martin moved toward the airlock without waiting for a response. His suit's movement was heavy and stiff, but that was the point. The weight meant protection. The stiffness meant it could take impacts. He had worn suits like this into active war zones. He could certainly wear it to a crashed ship. The airlock cycled open, and Martin stepped back out onto the surface of 438B. The landscape had not changed in 10 days. The same rocky terrain, the same dark sky with its 2 pale moons, the same wind that never seemed to stop. Martin activated his suit's lights and began the walk toward the crash site. It took him 40 minutes to reach the wreckage. His suit's radiation detector had been screaming warnings for the last 5 minutes of the journey. The numbers were terrible. High levels of radiation flooding through the ship's damaged core. Martin's suit could handle it for maybe 30 minutes before the shielding began to fail. That meant he had 30 minutes to reach the mother, stabilize her, and get her back to the transport sled. He had done more with less time. The ship's interior was darker now. Whatever ambient light had been there before was gone. Martin's suit lights cut through the darkness like 2 white swords. He moved carefully through the twisted corridors. Metal creaked beneath his feet. The ship was dying, slowly collapsing in on itself. When he reached the cargo hold, his heart nearly stopped. The mother was still there, but she was barely breathing. Her chest moved in shallow, irregular patterns. Her eyes were closed. Her scales had lost all color, turning gray and dull. She looked like a painting of a dragon rather than a living creature. Martin did rapid calculations. The mother had 10 hours, maybe 15, before the radiation poisoning killed her. She might have less. "I am here," Martin said. His suit's external speakers carried his voice through the cargo hold. "I am here, and I am going to bring you back to your daughter. Your daughter is alive and getting stronger. You are going to meet her again, and you are going to see how beautiful she is." The dragon mother's eyes opened slowly. They tracked Martin's movements. Recognition flashed in those ancient eyes. This was the human who had taken her child. This was the human who had promised to return. Martin began working immediately. He had brought surgical supplies and stabilization equipment. He worked on the mother's visible wounds first, using advanced adhesives to seal the worst of the bleeding. The adhesives would not hold forever, but they would hold long enough to get her to the station medical bay. The mother's wing was beyond saving. Martin could see that immediately. The bones were shattered. The connective tissue was torn, but the creature could live without that wing. She would recover eventually. Martin administered pain suppressors through the mother's thick scales. The drug was human-derived, but based on his research, it should work on physiology. The mother's breathing became slightly more regular. Moving the massive creature onto the transport sled was the hardest part. Martin had to use the sled's mechanical arms to lift her. Even with the equipment, it was a test of his strength and his will. The mother was unconscious now, but her body still twitched with pain. Martin worked as gently as he could, securing her carefully to the sled. His radiation exposure counter was climbing. 30% used, 40%. He was running out of time. Martin activated the sled's motor. It hummed to life, and the massive creature began moving toward the exit. Martin led the sled quickly through the corridors. The ship groaned around him as if protesting their theft of its only remaining passenger. They were halfway to the exit when the floor collapsed. Martin did not even see it coming. One moment he was walking on metal. The next moment the metal was gone, and he was falling through space, his suit hitting the sled, both of them dropping through darkness. Martin slammed hard onto a lower level. Pain exploded through his right shoulder. He forced himself to move immediately, not allowing himself to assess the damage. He pulled the sled motor's activation cord again. The sled dropped onto the level beside him, and its motor kicked in, pulling the dragon mother toward the exit. Martin ran after it, moving on legs that burned with effort. His suit was showing damage now. The armor on his right side was cracked. His radiation shielding was compromised. His exposure counter had jumped to 70%. He reached the exit to the cargo hold and pulled himself up through the torn hull. The sled was already moving away from the ship, dragging the mother toward safety. Martin threw himself onto the sled and held on as it accelerated across the rocky terrain. Behind them, the ship gave a final groan. A massive section of the hull collapsed inward. If they had been inside for another 10 seconds, they would have died in the rubble. Martin held on tight to the sled and did not look back. The return journey to the station was a nightmare blur of pain and determination. Martin's suit was bleeding radiation exposure warnings. He was down to minimal shielding. Every meter they crossed felt like a victory. The station's lights grew larger in his vision. Closer, closer. Was waiting at the outer airlock when Martin pulled the sled through the emergency entrance. The mechanic immediately began cycling the lock, sealing the outside behind them. "She is still alive," Martin gasped. His oxygen was running low. His heart was pounding harder than it should. "Get her to the medical bay now." The decontamination process felt like it lasted forever. Martin stood in the radioactive shower as the station's systems washed the contamination off his suit. His exposure reading was critical, but survivable. He had about 5 years off his life expectancy, he guessed. He would not be around to see those years anyway. When the cycle finished, Martin removed the suit and immediately moved to the medical bay. The dragon mother was already on the examination table, had removed the adhesives Martin had applied, and now her wounds were exposed. They were as bad as he had feared, but there were also things Martin could do. Martin grabbed his surgical equipment without hesitation. He had spent 3 decades saving lives. He knew exactly what he was doing. He worked through the night. Surgery, blood transfusions synthesized from cells the mother was still producing despite her injuries. Careful monitoring of her vital signs, constant adjustments to keep her stable. Aurora was awake when Martin finally collapsed into a chair at 3 in the morning. The hatchling had climbed down from her own medical bed and was standing beside her mother's table. The small dragon was making soft, repeated sounds, calling, waiting for a response that would not come until the mother was healed enough to wake. Martin put his arm around Aurora's small shoulders. "She is going to live," he told the hatchling. "I promise. Your mother is going to live and you are going to grow up together. I did not spend my entire life learning medicine just to fail now. She is going to live." Aurora pressed against Martin's side and made a sound that might have been a cry or a sigh of relief. The mother opened her eyes on the 7th day. Martin was there, as he had been for every single moment of those 7 days. He had barely left the medical bay. He had performed surgery, monitored vital signs, adjusted medications, and talked constantly to both dragons about healing and hope and the future. When the mother's eyes opened, Martin felt something release in his chest that he had not even realized was tight. "Welcome back," he said quietly. "Your daughter is safe, she is strong, you are both going to survive." The mother's eyes tracked across the medical bay. They found Aurora, who was sleeping on a heated bed nearby. The small dragon looked completely different from when Martin had first found her. Her scales glowed with deep blue and silver colors. Her breathing was normal. Her heartbeat was strong. She was going to live. The mother made a sound, quiet and low. There was pain in it, but also relief. Her massive head turned slowly toward Martin. She studied him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being seen for the first time. "My name is Martin," he said. He did not know if she could understand, but he said it anyway. "I am a doctor. I have been taking care of your daughter. I promised you I would bring her back safely, and I kept that promise. Now I am going to take care of you too." The mother closed her eyes again. She was conserving energy, letting her body focus on healing. But Martin saw acceptance in that gesture, understanding, trust. Over the following weeks, Martin developed a routine that had nothing to do with his old life of isolation and silence. Now there was constant activity. The mother required extensive physical therapy to rebuild her muscles after the surgery. Martin guided her through careful movements, stretching the healthy wing, working the damaged one as much as possible without causing harm. Aurora, now fully recovered, had become a constant presence in the medical bay. The hatchling followed Martin everywhere, her small claws clicking on the metal floor. She seemed to understand that he had saved her life and her mother's life. In her own way, she loved him. It was during the 4th week that the breakthrough in communication came. Martin was working with the mother on her mobility exercises when she made a series of sounds. Deliberate sounds. Complex sounds. Martin had been learning some of the vocalizations from Aurora, who seemed to enjoy teaching him. He recognized part of the pattern the mother was making. "Again," Martin said. "Can you say it again?" The mother repeated the sounds. This time, Martin understood the pattern more clearly. She was teaching him her language, teaching him not through intention necessarily, but through repetition and demonstration. "Your name," Martin realized. "You are telling me your name." The mother made the sound pattern again, and this time Martin heard it correctly. He tried to replicate it, but his human throat could not produce the exact tones. The mother made a sound that might have been something like laughter. Martin said, using the closest human approximation he could manage, "Your name is." Made the sound again, as if confirming it. She seemed satisfied that this human could at least try to get her name right. From that point on, communication became easier. Not fluent, not complete, but functional, taught Martin basic words. Food, pain, healing, good, child. Martin taught her English words in return. She could not pronounce them, but she seemed to understand. By the 8th week, could walk on her own. Her wound was healed. Her remaining wing was strong enough to lift her slightly off the ground, though flight was still impossible. But she could move. She could play with Aurora. She could exist as something more than a patient. It was on a day when the station's chronometer marked the official transition to a new year that asked Martin the question that would change everything. She had learned enough words now to make simple statements. She approached Martin in the medical bay, where he was updating Aurora's medical records, made a series of sounds, and then added the words he had taught her. "Ship," she said, the word for vessel. "Repair, home." Martin looked at her. He understood what she was saying. Her ship was damaged beyond repair, but there were other ships. And there was a home somewhere that she had been traveling to when her vessel crashed. "You want to go home?" Martin said. Made an affirmative sound, but then she added more, words mixed with vocalizations. Martin worked to understand. Home, family, others, learning, teaching. It took him several minutes, but he finally understood the full proposal. Species had a home world. They had a civilization. They had medical practitioners, but not ones trained in the methods Martin used. She was suggesting something that seemed impossible. She was suggesting that Martin come with them, that he teach them his healing techniques, that he become part of their world. "You want me to come with you?" Martin asked. Moved her head in a gesture that clearly meant yes. Aurora, who was listening to the conversation, made an excited chirping sound. Martin sat down on the examination chair. He felt very old suddenly. He had spent 30 years in military service, fighting in wars. Then he had spent 2 years in complete isolation, waiting for death to take him. And now, in the span of 8 weeks, everything had changed again. He looked then at Aurora, who had pressed close to his side. The hatchling was looking at him with those intelligent eyes, waiting for his answer. Martin thought about his retirement jacket, hanging in his quarters. He thought about the quiet days he had been living, the silence he had thought he wanted. He thought about the fact that he had been slowly disappearing into that silence, becoming less alive every day. Then he thought about standing in a crashed ship, holding a small dragon against his chest. He thought about performing surgery by feel and instinct. He thought about the color returning to Aurora's scales. He thought about opening her eyes. He thought about purpose. "Yes," Martin said, "I will come with you," made a sound that was clearly one of joy. Aurora leaped onto Martin's lap and made chirping sounds of celebration. "But I need time to prepare," Martin continued. "I need to gather medical equipment. I need to transfer my knowledge to your medical practitioners. This is going to take weeks, maybe months." Made an affirmative sound. She did not seem to be in a rush. Her ship was gone, but her family was safe. Everything else could wait. Over the next 3 months, Martin prepared for a journey he had never imagined taking. Every piece of medical equipment in the station that might be useful. He recorded hours of instruction about human medical techniques. He trained and on how to maintain the station's systems in his absence. He even sent a formal notice to the government about his resignation from his position. Henderson came to see him the night before the rescue vessel arrived. "I thought you retired to get away from adventure," the station manager said. "I thought so too," Martin admitted. "Turns out I was wrong. Turns out I need this. I need purpose. I need to feel like what I do matters." "It matters," Henderson said. He was looking at who was resting nearby, at Aurora, who was curled up against her mother. "What you have done here matters more than anything I could say." The next morning, a ship descended from the sky. It was smaller than its original vessel, but it was clearly functional. The ramp lowered and figures emerged. Larger than older, wearing symbols that indicated authority and age and wisdom. Made a series of complex vocalizations. Martin had learned enough to understand that she was explaining what had happened, that she and her child had crashed, that this human had saved them, that she had invited Martin to come to their world. The eldest approached Martin slowly. The creature was massive and ancient and powerful, but her eyes held the same intelligence that Martin saw in its gaze, the same understanding of what it meant to live. "You save mother and child," the elder said in heavily accented English. "You save our future." "I did what any good doctor would do," Martin said. "No," the elder said. "Not all species save others. Many would have left them to die. You human, you choose to help." Martin nodded. There was not much to say to that. The elder gestured to the ship. "Come, you teach our people, you become part of family, is good." Martin looked at Aurora, at this old dragon who had somehow learned enough English to ask if he wanted to join her people. He thought about his retirement. He thought about the life he had chosen to leave behind. "It is good," Martin said. The journey to the would take 2 months of travel through space. Martin spent those months teaching people the basics of his medical techniques. He showed them how to use his instruments. He explained the philosophy behind human medicine, the focus on preserving life at all costs. When they arrived at Martin was offered a position as head of a new medical institute. They wanted him to train their people. They wanted him to bring human knowledge to their civilization. Martin accepted without hesitation. Years passed. Martin grew older still, but his life was no longer about waiting for death. It was about teaching and learning and helping. He watched Aurora grow from a hatchling into a young adult. He watched become a leader among her people, helping to guide them toward a new era of engagement with the galactic community. On the anniversary of the day he had found them in the crashed ship, Martin stood with and Aurora in the great hall of the medical institute. Young students moved between the teaching stations, learning the techniques Martin had brought from humanity. "Thank you," said in perfect English now, "for coming back that night, for saving my child, for saving me." "Thank you," Martin replied, "for asking me to stay, for giving an old man a reason to keep living." Aurora made a soft sound and pressed her head against Martin's shoulder. She was no longer a frightened hatchling, but she still had moments when she remembered how that old human had held her against his chest and brought her back from the edge of death. Outside the Institute's viewports, 2 moons rose over casting everything in pale blue light. Somewhere on a distant research station, it was New Year's Eve. But here, every day was a new beginning. Every day was a chance to save a life. Every day was a gift. The old war medic had gone to that crashed ship expecting nothing. He had left it with a new family. And in the end, that was the greatest discovery he could have made. Not some secret of the universe, not some hidden truth about the stars. Just the simple truth that life was better when shared. That purpose came not from isolation, but from connection. Martin smiled as he walked between the students, correcting a technique here, praising a breakthrough there. He was home. Finally, after all these years, he was home. Outside the medical bay, the station's systems hummed quietly. Inside, an old man sat with two dragons, and for the first time in weeks, Martin allowed himself to believe that he might actually succeed. Martin packed the equipment, sealed his radiation suit, and prepared to head back to the crash site. Aurora was awake when he left the medical bay. The hatchling watched him go with eyes that understood exactly what was happening. Martin had spent 30 years saving lives across galaxies. He had learned that species did not matter. Pain was pain. Fear was fear. The need to protect your family transcended every biological difference. And so an old man in a radiation suit, moving on tired legs, set out to keep a promise he had made to a dragon. Behind him, in the warmth of the medical bay, Aurora waited. She was strong enough to survive. Martin had made sure of that. Now he had to be strong enough to bring her mother home. Martin sat through the night, holding the small dragon's hand, keeping watch. Outside the station, on the cold, rocky surface of 438B, the mother lay dying in the darkness. But her child was safe. For now, that had to be enough. And scared and helpless, Martin made a decision that would change everything.